Chapter 14 of Lucy Gayheart by Willa, Cather. Soon after Sebastian left for his Eastern tour, Lucy got a letter from Harry Gordon. He was coming on for a week of the opera, and she must remember her promise. In those days, the New York Opera Company came to Chicago for several weeks every spring. Last year, she had been glad to go to the opera with Harry, but now everything was different. She didn't want to see him, didn't want to be reminded of Haverford or anything that lay behind her. She was going to the public library every day now to hunt through newspapers for notices of Sebastian's concerts. That took time. Her life was exactly as she wanted it, and Harry would spoil it. He would manage to prove to her that she had been living in a dream, that she was Lucy Gayheart and had been fooling herself all the while. In his letter, Harry asked where he could meet her. She knew he hated calling for her at the bakery. Sebastian didn't mind waiting in the restaurant downstairs when he came to take her out to dinner, but it annoyed Harry. She sent a note to the hotel where he would be stopping, telling him to meet her at Auerbach's studio on Monday after her lessons. Auerbach's show studio was used as a reception room when he was not giving a lesson there. His private office opened behind it. Across the hall was a much bleaker room with a north light, where Lucy heard the younger pupils and practiced if she had a vacant hour. On Monday afternoon, when Lucy came out from this back studio, she found Auerbach himself in the reception room entertaining Harry Gordon, and they seemed to be getting on very well together. As she crossed the room toward him, she suddenly felt pleased with Harry. He came to meet her with such a jolly smile, fresh and ruddy and well turned out in his new gray clothes. In a flash, she was conscious of the things she had always liked best in him, the fine physical balance, which made him a good dancer and a tireless skater. Paul Auerbach seemed as pleased at their meeting as Lucy was herself. He was plainly reluctant to have Harry's call cut short, urged him to come in again, suggested that Lucy bring him out to his house to meet Mrs. Auerbach. As he walked to the door with him, he asked Harry when he had arrived. Harry replied he had come in by the morning train, without betraying the fact that he had already been in Chicago 3 days. He had written his tailor to have 2 suits ready for the last fitting, and he made no calls until they were sent to his hotel. He wanted to wear exactly what well-dressed men in Chicago were wearing. Subway. After they left the studio, Harry said they must go somewhere for dinner. Shall we go early? Or do you want to dress and have me call for you later? Oh, no. We can dine and stay tomorrow evening before the opera. I'd rather you took me to some quiet place where we can talk. Anything you like. We mean to have one good time this week, don't we, Lucy? Lucy remembered that when Harry was out for a good time, he swept one along with him, just as he did in a polka or a schottisch. She liked to do those rather violent, jumpy dances with him. He had a good sense of rhythm, put so much lift and spring behind his partner. When she got home that evening, Lucy told herself that it was nice to see Harry again. She hated the idea of throwing over old friends. She was thinking, as she undressed, that Harry would be very intelligent if he were not so conceited. It was a kind of mental nearsightedness and kept him from seeing what didn't immediately concern him. But tonight, she hadn't minded that he was pleased with himself, because he was pleased with everything. He hadn't made the countryman's mistake of finding fault with the service and the food. He had tipped the waiters generously, without fumbling or ostentation. He had insisted upon a drive along Michigan Avenue before they came home, a hopeful sign. With the Gordons, who had good horses and carriages of their own, a hired carriage was regarded as a painful extravagance and meant the shortest route. She thought she must have forgotten how much she liked to hear Harry talk, for his voice chiefly. No matter what he was saying, you could guess his real feeling from his voice, once you knew its several disguises. There was the genial, confidential tone just tinged by regret, with which he refused a loan to a man who needed it. And there was the other friendliness, not so very different, a little concerned indeed, but that was real. The next evening, for Aida, Harry appeared in his new dress clothes, very handsome and correct. Lucy had been teaching all afternoon and was rather tired when they drove to his hotel for dinner, but his good spirits revived her. At the opera, they had excellent seats. Harry had written for them weeks ago. He was in his most engaging mood and didn't once try to ridicule things which she held sentimentally sacred, as he said. He enjoyed the music and the audience and being with Lucy. His enthusiasm for the tenor was sincere. The duet in the third act was, he whispered, his idea of music. He beat time softly to the triumphal march and didn't mind that the trumpets played off pitch. When he said goodnight to Lucy at the foot of her staircase, she could honestly tell him that she loved going to the opera with him. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15 of Lucy Gayheart, written by Willa, Cather. On the morning after they heard Othello, Lucy cut out her practicing because Harry asked her to take him through the art museum. It was a rather gentle, sunny morning, and as they walked over toward Michigan Avenue, they stopped to do a little shopping. Lucy caught at every pretext for delay. Last year, when they went through the museum together, they had disagreed violently about almost everything and had come away in a bad humor. Marshall Fields was a much better place for Harry, and it was fun choosing handkerchiefs and neckties for him. But he kept looking at his watch and got her to the gallery soon after they were open. He was careful not to make any comments that would irritate her. She could actually feel caution in his step and voice. What a fury she must have been last spring. Not once did she catch that smart squint in his eyes. He did occasionally square his shoulders before a picture, twist his mouth awry, as if he would like to call the painter's bluff. But he did not try to be funny. When they reached a lone exhibit of French Impressionists, he broke down and began pointing out figures that were not correctly drawn. Now, you'll admit, Lucy, he would begin persuasively. Certainly, I admit, but I don't think it matters. I don't know anything about pictures, but I think some are meant to represent objects and others are meant to express a kind of feeling merely, and then accuracy doesn't matter. But anatomy is a fact, he insisted, and facts are at the bottom of everything. She did not answer him impatiently, as she would have done once, but bent her head a little and spoke in a quiet voice which disconcerted him. Are they, Harry? I'm not so sure. He didn't reply to this. Something in her tone had made him feel very tenderly toward her. She must be tired, he thought. He saw a door open, leading to one of the stone porticos at the back of the building that looked out on the lake. He touched Lucy's elbow. Let's go out on that balcony and get some fresh air. The morning had grown warmer, but a mist had come up which hid the skyline. The water was faintly blue, and above it everything was soft, a silvery mist with changing blue and green at the heart of it, far out. Even the gray gulls flew by on languid wings. The air felt full of spring showers. On a morning like this, Lucy felt an ache come up in her throat. When she looked off at that soft promise of spring already happening in the colors of the sky before it had come on earth, such a longing awoke in her that it seemed as if it would break her heart. That happiness she had so lately found, where was it? Everything threatened it. The way of the world was against it. It had escaped her. She had lost it as one can lose a ravishing melody, remembering the mood of it, the kind of joy it gave, but unable to recall precisely the air itself. And she couldn't breathe in this other kind of life. It stifled her, woke in her a frantic fear, the fear of falling back into it forever. If only one could lose one's life and one's body and be nothing but one's desire. If the rest could melt away, and that could float with the gulls out yonder where the blue and green were changing. A faraway voice was saying something about lunch. She came back with a start. "No, Harry, please, I have a headache, and I want to get home as quickly as I can. If I am to go with you tonight, I must lie down and try to get over this." All that afternoon, Lucy stayed quietly in her room. She told herself that she would see Harry Gordon's vacation through and do her best for him. There shouldn't be one flash of temper to regret afterwards. It wasn't his fault that she had changed so much. She was sorry now that she had ever let him come at all, but she must make the best of it. She had enjoyed going to 4 operas, one right after the other. She hadn't heard a great many in her life. She was too busy and too poor. They had listened like 2 young people who had good seats and who were there to be pleased with everything. Tonight, they would hear Traviata. And for tomorrow, Saturday, they had chosen the matinee instead of the evening performance because Lucy had never heard Lohengrin, and she especially wanted to. End of chapter 15. Chapter 16 of Lucy Gayheart, written by Willa, Cather. Saturday was a windy, bright April day. There were boys on the street selling violets and daffodils, and all the barrel organs were out playing "O Sole Mio." Lucy was in high spirits and felt sure of a happy ending. Harry was leaving tomorrow. It chanced that Lucy had never heard even the prelude to Lohengrin played by an orchestra. The first measures caught her unaware. Before the first act was half over, she was longing to be alone. This wasn't the kind of opera to be hearing with Harry. She found herself leaning away from him as far as possible. The music kept bringing back things she used to feel in Sebastian's studio. Belief in an invisible, belief in an invisible, I can't say that word. Inviolable. I-N-V-I-O. Inviolable. In an invisible, inviolable. Inviolable. If I wrote this book, I would never have used that word because I can't pronounce it. Inviolable world. Let's leave it at that. When the act closed and the lights were turned on, her eyes were still shining with tears. If Harry had begun to tease, it wouldn't have mattered then. But he didn't. He glanced sideways at her and then read his program. Presently, he ventured a remark. "That tenor's fine now, isn't he? He's a good actor, too." "Yes, he believes in it," she spoke quietly. She was beginning to feel hostile toward him, though he was behaving so well. Harry understood that she was deeply moved. He would have thought that sort of thing ridiculous in a man, but in a girl it was rather attractive. When the curtain fell on the second act, Lucy turned in her seat and looked restlessly about her. In the same row, far to the left, a man was leaning forward, looking at her, a red face, a very white shirt front, an excited, perspiring smile. She caught her breath and cried aloud, "Giuseppe!" Though he was not near enough to hear her. She leaned forward and waved her hand. "Giuseppe!" He bowed again and again in a way that was not familiar, not servile, but wholly devoted and respectful. The sight of him had brought a rush of delight over her whole body. She shivered and her hands grew cold. That he should have been there all the while, he who is such a part of her other life. She sat through the rest of the opera feeling that nothing had really vanished. Everything would come back. When the singers came out to take the curtain calls, she looked not at them but at Giuseppe, who stood applauding, with his hands far out in front of him. The ends of his black and white silk muffler hung almost to his knees. As the steel curtain descended, he snatched his hat and overcoat and ran off through the crowd. Lucy slipped her arms into the cloak Harry had been patiently holding. "Who's your enthusiastic friend?" he asked good-naturedly as he steered her toward the back of the house. "He's an Italian who works about the studio where I go to play accompaniments." "Music student, you mean?" "Oh, no. He's a workman, but he's very musical." Harry laughed. "He looks it." As they made their way slowly through the crowded foyer, Harry kept trying to hum Lohengrin's Farewell to the Swan. Lucy began talking rapidly to divert his attention, but Harry had liked that song, and he kept trying. When they stepped outside into the treacherous mildness of the April afternoon, he hailed a cab. "How about a little drive to get some air?" "It's too early for dinner." "Take us out through the parks, driver, for an hour or so. There's no place anybody can make a call on you except in a cab, Lucy." He sat down beside her, stretched his long legs, and began to laugh softly. You know, there was something cute about that little dago. I like to see people have a good time. But how the mischief can he afford a seat like that? He spoke with concern, seemed worried about it. "Oh, when they admire anything very much, they don't count the cost." She tried to say this carelessly. He shook his head. "All the same, the day of counting costs comes along in the end, Lucy mio." Lucy bit her lip. Wasn't that Harry Gordon in 2 words? He had been hearing Italian operas all week and felt acclimated. Lucy mio. And a moment ago he thought he was humming the tenor's aria. She looked out of the window and tried to fix her attention on the misty blue spring sky and the dove-colored water. Distant lighthouses were faintly shining. Harry didn't mind her silence. He was thinking he would bring Lucy on for the opera every year. But they might just as well go through to New York. Then they could go in midwinter when business was dull at home. He was full of his own plans, and the future looked bright to him. There was a part of himself that Harry was ashamed to live out in the open. He hated a sentimental man. But he could live it through Lucy. She would be his excuse for doing a great many pleasant things he wouldn't do on his own account. He pressed her arm as he lounged back in the cab and began humming the swan song again. Lucy stirred. No, it goes like this, Harry." He ducked his head and laughed. "Right you are. Now suppose we turn and drive back for dinner." The dining room at the Auditorium Hotel was filled up when they entered. A great many people were dining there before the evening performance. Harry found a table to his taste and ordered champagne to be brought with the soup, remarking that it was never too early for a good thing. "When I have a place of my own, I shall keep plenty of it on hand for special occasions." He talked a good deal through dinner, saying he hated going home tomorrow, but he had to relieve his father in the bank. His father wanted to get down to Hot Springs for his rheumatism. He thanked Lucy for having given him so much of her time. "Music doesn't mean much to me without you, except to remind me of you." She threw him a smile. She had less color than usual. She was dreadfully tired. Thank God tonight was the end of it. She had gone her limit, and now she wanted to be left alone with her own life. The dinner seemed to be dragging on. Even the dessert didn't end it. Harry ordered liqueurs and lit a cigar. He leaned across the table and took up Lucy's gloves, which were lying by her plate. "Here comes the subway." "Sorry, Harry. Subway's going to, interrupt you for a second." "You should run now, Lucy. Run! You're not going to like what he's going to say. Use the subway as cover. Run, Lucy, run!" And now, Lucy. Something affectionate and masterful in his voice made her dread what was coming. And now, isn't it about time we got down to business? We know each other pretty well. You've had your little fling. You want to see the world, but you'll see it a lot better with me. Why waste any more time? This is April. I should think we might be married in May. Oh, June if you like. But we mustn't let another summer slip by. Lucy frowned and avoided his eyes. Nonsense, Harry. I'm not ready to marry anyone. I won't be for a long time. He put his open palm down heavily on the table. But I am. Just ready. And we've always known we would do it someday, both of us. She gave a dry laugh. Have we? Why, you haven't been sure of yourself half the time. Harry chuckled guiltily. Most of the time I've been sure. Then he looked at her with a singular straightforwardness, looked quite through the professional geniality which usually gleamed over his eyes like a pair of spectacles. All the time I've been sure at bottom. I have never been able to believe in any sort of happy life except with you. That's the truth. Lucy felt it was the truth. She could find nothing to say. Everything will be just as you wish it. You'll have the kind of house you like, the kind of friends. I want the life you'd naturally make for yourself, and it's the only life I do want. She was trapped. He was looking straight and talking straight. When he was like this, she was afraid of him. It seemed unfair to sit there and let him take off all his jocular masks and show her a naked man who had perhaps never been exposed to any eye before. She must stop him before he went any further. She thrust out her hands across the table. Don't, Harry, please. It's no use. Everything has changed this winter. My life is tied up with somebody else. It's done. I have no choice. I love another man. Gordon seemed not to understand her at first. But what's all this? Another man? And he lets you play around with me all week? You're trying to fool me, Lucy. He looked at her with a threat in his eyes. She had fallen into this. She must get out of it. Get it over. No, I'm not. He's away. It's the man I work for, play accompaniments for. I'm not the same person I used to be. I didn't mean to tell anyone, but I can't let you go on making plans. While she was speaking, the harshness on Gordon's face slowly melted. A twinkle came in his eye, as if he had found the catch in the puzzle. He so far forgot himself that he put his hand down over Lucy's and held it firmly when she tried to draw it away. Now, Lucy, every girl falls in love with her singing teacher, but I thought you, for one, had escaped. She felt her cheeks burn with anger. He's not my singing teacher. He's a great artist, she muttered, angrier still because this sounded so childish. Very well, I have no objection. The greater the better. But you'll soon recover, my dear. He refused to be annoyed. He was glowing with tolerance. She gave him a defiant look and managed to get her hand away. He considered a moment, then leaned forward and spoke softly in a confident, teasing tone. Now, see here, Lucy. How far has this nonsense gone? The dining room swam and tilted before Lucy's eyes. How far? She broke out in a flash of scorn. How far? All the way. All the way. There's no going back. Can't you understand anything? She did not see his face. Her eyes were blind as if she were looking into a furnace, but she knew that he got up and left the table. When she had recovered herself a little, she saw him at the other end of the room, talking to the head waiter. He put something in the waiter's hand and walked out of the dining room. Lucy drank some ice water slowly. She was ashamed that she had lied. She had tried to tell him the truth about a feeling, but a feeling meant nothing to him. He had to be clubbed by a situation. She supposed it was just his coarse good nature, his readiness to accept as a negligible truancy anything not actually compromising, that had driven her beyond herself. It was as if he had brought all his physical force, his big, well-kept body, to ridicule something that had no body, that was a faith, an ardor. Why had she even tried to be nice to him when she knew all the while he was like that? Well, it was over now, and she hoped she had cut through his stupidity and conceit. It seemed that she had, since he did not come back. After about a quarter of an hour, the head waiter came to her table and, bending down, spoke to her in a way which made an awkward situation seem quite usual and in order. Miss Gordon said, Miss, that if he were to not come back from the telephone in 10 minutes, you should not wait for him. He said you would understand. Yes, thank you. Lucy caught up her gloves and her bag, in which there was no money at all. The check? She stammered. The check is paid, miss. Shall I call a cab for you? Yes, please. He gave an order to one of the service boys and held her cloak for her. You will find it very warm outside, miss, like a summer evening. We have had good weather for the opera season, and last year it was so bad. He spoke without an accent, but his voice and intonation were unmistakably Italian. He took Lucy through the long dining room with an air of authority, as if he were conducting some important personage, and at the door motioned one of his subordinates to put her into the carriage. She had not even a quarter to give the boy who brought the cab. Harry Gordon had walked off like that, leaving her to get home as best she could. What a coward! What a bore! She had some money at home in her bureau drawer. But suppose she didn't have any? She might walk home for all he cared. When the cab stopped before the bakery, she asked the cabman whether he could come upstairs for her fare. I'm too tired to bring it down, driver. Sure, miss. I gotta wait. Just sit still while I fasten my hitch strap. He helped her up the 2 flights and thanked her for his tip. That's the end of chapter 16.